The Asian community and the Latino community are in a race to see who is the biggest bootlickers to white supremacy.
Asians and Hispanics be on white people too much for me. Because I've seen Asian people come out in protest of black people getting reparations. Has nothing to do with them. I've seen Hispanic people come out in protest of black people getting reparations, and it has nothing to do with you.
Asians are also used to gaslight Latino people. The classic model minority triangulation is white people saying to black people, look at Asians, they're doing so well. Why can't you be like that? Haha. That's been ongoing and super harmful. But
about Asians and Latinos identifying as white?
Yes.
White?
They always like to associate themselves with whiteness.
Yeah. Well, see, in the Latino culture, that's something that is something that's embedded into that culture going back to the colonialist days.
You want me to do the nail for you? You want the keto gel? It's only $5. Yeah, like, to be honest, I think fish sauce is really smelly. Yeah, the nail salon ladies are probably talking shit about you. Ling ling.
oh my god, I'm the only Asian in this group. It's like I'm Niha Kailan or something.
Yeah, I don't like Asian boys either. Like, they're all so nerdy, you know? Vietnamese is so funny. Like, pho that bit. It sounds like
So back in 2025, Black Americans said, we're going to sit this one out. And Latino said, no, you have to come out with us. And the fact that nothing is changing is your fault, even though it was us that didn't vote for our own best interest. Then the Latino community, instead of going to other communities such as the Asian community or the Middle Eastern community, decided to get mad at Black Americans because they wanted to do whatever they wanted with their personal time. And now Black Americans are telling Asian people, look, there may be anti-Blackness in your culture. Can you please address it? And Asians literally were like, So Black Americans are like, okay, we're going to boycott your businesses then. Which they very much can. It's their money. They can do whatever they want with it. I've been heading this way for a while, but Latinos and Asian people and other immigrant groups feel entitled to the resources of Black Americans, which is insane.
Everyone seems to fear a black economic stronghold or black economic power because everyone knows we don't really need them. So they tirelessly try to keep us dependent on them, and they do this systemically. And they do this through a brainwashing of sorts. So by always giving other minorities or people of color somebody to look down on, well, if black people get repaired for what's been done to us. And I would make an argument that at this point, not only reparations for slavery, but reparations for Jim Crow and reparations for the crack epidemic. Everybody seems to have an issue with the black economic independence. And I'll say this because they understand the game. They understand that if black people start ascending economically, well, we won't be at the bottom of the totem pole, and one of y'all will. That's the only way this thing works. That's the only way this system works. It has to have somebody at the bottom. It has to have somebody to punch down on. You come over here and y'all get real fluent in the punch down game. And for whatever reason, we always seem to be the victims and we ain't did to none of y'all. White people oppress you as well. And white people oppress themselves. Yet all the fallout seems to come.
The difference between being accepted by white people and being accepted by other people of color. When Asians try to get accepted by white people, we dress like them, we try to talk like them, we sell them the parts of our culture that they like and tolerate when they shit on the parts of our culture that they don't like. You marry them and they're still kind of racist to you. Most of the time, you spend your whole life bending over backwards and they still don't like you. They will still send their government agencies after you. They will still kidnap you and deport you back to Asia. But do you know how low the bar is for getting accepted by other people of color? I don't even talk about them sometimes. I make a video talking about how Asians should be proud of our heritage and stand up for ourselves. We can be who we are and we don't have to cower on the floor in Koto for white acceptance. And suddenly my comment section is filled with other people of color cheering me on. The Latinos claim me as their prima, their hermana. Black people are applauding me and posting memes. The native people quietly announce themselves and say, yeah, we're listening. We like it. The Asians that are not from the parts of Asia that I'm from start a table giggling in the back. All you have to do as an Asian person for other people of color to fuck with you is to be proud of your heritage and show that you're not going to bow down to white supremacy. And suddenly, you're everybody's cousin. Other people of the global majority love Asians. They love us. They just want to make sure we're safe. They want to make sure that like this individual Asian is safe before like they come over and kiki with us. They've been wanting to be our friend for a long ass time. I like it so much better over here. I see them do this with white people too. As soon as a white person doesn't identify with whiteness as a concept, or who supports their rights or boosts their voices, they're calling the white person cousin. Maybe it's just something in our cultures. Like, we want to be hospitable, we want to be welcoming, we want to make friends, all of us. I think even white people deep down want to relate to us on a human to human level, but so much of their programming just gets in the way. But the point of this video is to say, if you want to be accepted by white people, the bar is like in the sky somewhere. And if you want to be accepted by other people of the global majority, the bar's on the floor. Like, all you have to do is treat them like human beings, treat yourself like a human being in the face of white supremacy, and oh my god, they're gonna love you. Is that Asians are also used to gaslight Latino people, mostly around immigration. Why couldn't you guys come here the right way? Asians did it the right way, look at how well they're doing. Their kids are going to all these prestigious colleges, and they are making so much money, blah, blah, blah. And this gaslighting is stupid for a number of reasons. Number one, Asians are getting deported too. Like, we are very much also targeted by ICE. And Southeast Asians and South Asians and West Asians especially do not get to be the model minority that East Asians like me get to be because of more negative stereotypes about darker skinned Asians, Asians who look like what they consider Middle Eastern. And then on the other side, the problem with telling Latino people to come here the right way is that so many of them are indigenous to the Americas. Like, a third of the US used to be Mexico. So many countries in the Caribbean and South America were destabilized by American intervention as well. And then when it comes to Afro-Latinos, that part of their ancestry was brought to the Americas against their will. So for Latino people, the US southern border is very much an artificial invention. And then to point out East Asians and be like, oh, come here like them. So many of the East Asians who are allowed to come here through like the student visa program or the H-1B visa system, they are the most well-trained, highest scoring on standardized tests people from the entire continent that were selected specifically to make Asians a model minority as a wedge between white people and black people and between white people and Latino people. I'm tired of this all. I'm tired of being the minority that is just used to gaslight everybody else.
How come Asians never talk about how Latinos think we're perfect? How come no one's talking about that? I look like this, I speak a little bit of Spanish, all of a sudden the tamales lady is calling me her son. Do you know what I'm saying? They'll be like, ¿de dónde eres? Where are you from? Where are you from? And I'm like, soy chinito. They go, no mames. There's no way.
And the thing when it comes to like Asians and Hispanic people being like on white people's, I seen Deontay Kyle's post. That's how they got into America, especially Asians. That's how they became the model minority, by just literally kissing as much white as possible. It is what it is, man. You got a few Asians and Mexicans that see through the and understand like, hey, it ain't cool what it is. Like, we already have a culture. We don't need to kiss anyone's ass to be accepted. We're beautiful enough. The laws that these people's forefathers put out shows that we can come to this country. Like, that's why they're making laws now to try to put us out of it. But it is what it is.
This is for the Asian American community in particular right now. You see the political state of the world, and we see how you guys are responding to it. While Black and brown people are still being violently persecuted all over the United States, we are seeing how one particular community is remaining silent. And I have to be honest, there are a great amount of Asian Americans who are very politically active, but it is in a very tiny, tiny minority. And even in this tiny minority, you guys don't even try to help them. You guys don't even help your own people. And no, I don't think that the Asian community violently hates Black and brown people generally. I just think that you guys love and are way too obsessed with obtaining the model minority myth. It will never happen. You are not white. Some of you guys are so in love with the idea of becoming white or having this proximity to whiteness that you guys are willing to hate and excuse the hate for Black and brown people right now. Where's the humanity? I'm saying this as somebody who knows the history of the United States and has seen how the revolution has played out with complete solidarity across all communities. There is no reason why the Asian American community, who is so prideful about being Asian, mind you, in California especially, should not be taking after that same history and standing in solidarity with Black and brown people. This is not to say that I will find any race riots reasonable. However, when Black and brown people get fed up and they start to riot against white supremacy, what side of the line will you be standing on?
I'll be attacked by the left and call me white supremacist, but I have one ask for them. It's just when you give me my hood, make sure it's got the little slits and not the circles so I can see better.
I genuinely want to know, was it worth it? Was that little chuckle worth tap dancing and feeling like a white man for that one moment worth it? Because truth be told, no matter how much ass kissing and bootlicking you do, you will never be white, nor will you have the privileges of being white. Especially when the same people you seek validation for are the same ones who want to deport you, along with many other Vietnamese people, Southeast Asian refugees, and other people of color. It's generally a slap in the face to want to be the face of the American dream when Vietnamese people are dying in ICE custody. As recent as Dong Van Boy, who passed away on April 1st, 2026. Want to act like America saved us. But the truth of the matter is, it wasn't just a Vietnam War. It was a genocide inflicted by the US. If it weren't for the American intervention, Vietnam wouldn't have been divided and escalated the way it did in the first place. You don't get to ignore the fact that US bombed our country, bombed schools, bombed hospitals, burnt our houses, and locked our people in outdoor cages to die. They sprayed over 19 million gallons of Agent Orange, causing severe lasting health issues like cancer and birth defects that still impact us till this day. You don't get to ignore the war crimes like Sung Tang Massacre and My Lai Massacre, where women and children were assaulted, murdered, and as young as 10 years old. And then turn around and act like America is our savior when they have never truly acknowledged or apologized for the war crimes they've committed. No real accountability, no reparations. Meanwhile, you sit here and glow about moving to America when you're 2 years old, acting like you escaped communism, while Vietnamese people in the mainland are left to suffer, dealing with poverty, lack of resources, and having to rebuild Vietnam from the ground up to what it is today. And then the nerve for Americans to write books and make films about the Vietnam War, centering themselves as the victims and the heroes, while conveniently leaving out the war crimes and harm inflicted on Vietnamese people. The US has always operated a warmongering empire. And even now we're seeing the consequences of that with Palestine, Lebanon, Iran, and all of the oppressed countries. Our tax money is being funded to Israel. I guess that doesn't fit your narrative, does it? It's so obvious you're brainwashed and whitewashed. If your head wasn't so far up from Trump's ass, maybe you'd see the bigger picture. Not to mention, this is the same man who is out here claiming witchcraft is taking over California, and we need to protect Virginia to stay Christian, all while being a failed Virginia Senate candidate for not once, but twice. Lost twice like the loser sellout that you are. Hope all that pick-me behavior worked out for you. Because the same people you're begging for white validation are calling you slurs and making jokes of your name, calling you Hung Chinko. They're laughing at you, not with you. And mind you, this is the same man who claimed he's African American as he lived in Africa at one point. Like, how spineless and desperate can you be? Lastly, as a proud Southeast Asian Vietnamese woman, I need the Vietnamese community to wake up and stand up. Especially in moments like this, where people within our community are perpetuating harmful, disgusting, racist rhetoric like this. Pick up a history book. Learn your history from an unbiased, non-American perspective. Because I'd be damned if I ever bring a child into this world. They grow up thinking it's okay to degrade yourself like this grown, self-hating, burnt-looking self for white validation and become America's puppet to feel like they belong somewhere. Reparations should be in order for Vietnamese people and the Black community affected by the transatlantic slave trade. That history doesn't just disappear because you choose to be ignorant, be a sellout for white validation, and it doesn't fit your narrative.
When I say that Asian Americans have proximity to whiteness, here's what I don't mean. I don't mean that white people see us as white, or that they treat us as if we are white people. I also don't mean that Asian Americans don't face discrimination and racism in the US, because obviously we do. But it is being intentionally ignorant, in my opinion, to say that Asian Americans face the same deeply entrenched and structural inequalities as Black and brown folks in the US. I think what drives some of this feeling within the Asian American community is this feeling that, we have not been taken seriously, that the discrimination and racism that we face isn't acknowledged. But two things can be true. We can both demand that the racism and discrimination that we face be acknowledged and addressed, while also understanding that the systematic inequalities that the Black and brown community faces is different in kind than the history of Asian American racism in this country.
Why do Latinos consistently align themselves with whiteness? Well, there is a historical reason for that, and we're going to get into it. All of this starts in Latin America and the Caribbean during colonization. At this time, in that region, there were three major human trafficking organizations: the British, the French, and the Spanish. They all had colonies in Latin America and the Caribbean, and they were all engaging in human trafficking, aka slavery. But the three countries had very different approaches to how they organized society. The British were known to be the harshest of the human traffickers in this region. Under British colonial rule, there were strict and rigid racial boundaries. Basically, there was the white people and the non-white people, and that was it. There was no mobility between the two. If you were born enslaved, you were probably gonna die enslaved. And the British were also known for being the most brutal traffickers out of them all. Then you have the French. They weren't as brutal as the British, and they weren't as rigid in their racial boundaries, but they were rigid as well. You can see here the caste system from Haiti, which was then known as Saint-Domingue. There's essentially three classes here: white people, colored people, and slaves. And as you can see, the white people are split up into the Grand Blanc, which are the wealthy planters, and the Petit Blanc, which are the merchants and the officials. And you have the gens de couleur. They are separated by free people by virtue of having white parentage, aka mixed people, and then free people who purchased their freedom. And lastly, you got the black people who are enslaved. So as you can see here, there's more stratification of their racial classification than in the British colonies, which were essentially white and non-white. There was some porousness between racial distinctions, but ultimately it was still very rigid in the French colonies, and what you were born into is what you would die into. Social mobility, upward mobility really wasn't a thing, which is part of the reason why the Haitian Revolution started. And now for the Spanish colonial system. This is the caste system of Latin America. As you can see, there are so many different categories that you can be placed into. It is not the binary white or non-white that you see in British colony. And it is much more complex than what you see in French colony caste systems. And that's because the Spanish had a very porous racial boundary system. The Spanish were much more flexible. They allowed for upward mobility. The Spaniards were down to intermarry with black people and indigenous people, something you rarely saw in the British colonies, and you didn't see that much in the French colony. And as a result, in Spanish colonies, you had much more of an opportunity for upward mobility. Just because you were born a slave doesn't mean you had to die enslaved. You could literally marry your way out of enslavement and up the social hierarchy. This is where the concept of blanqueamiento came in. This is where the concept of mejorar la raza came in, which means making your race better. Blanqueamiento means whitening the race. Because in Spanish colonies, you were actually able to improve your station in life by whitening your bloodline. So this mentality stuck. And it got passed on generation after generation, even after slavery was abolished. And so now in 2026, you have a whole entire community of people across dozens of countries who believe that aligning themselves with whiteness can improve their station in life. But unfortunately for them, this isn't Latin America. So that mentality is not pervasive here, which is why they keep screwing themselves electorally.
Because see, what happens is that Brazil was, well, settled by the Portuguese. The Spanish-speaking countries were settled by the Spaniards. Now, what happened was this historically. You got to go all the way back from the beginning with this transatlantic slave trade or whatever. Now, there were indigenous people, what we call Indians, in all of these countries, South America, Central America, America, whatever. The first slave traders. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. Who were the first people to engage in the transatlantic slave trade? What country was first? Right?
It's Portugal, right?
It was Portugal.
Portugal, right? Yeah, it's Portugal.
It was Portugal.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when the Portuguese came over here, when they went to Africa, and well, first of all, they didn't just go into Africa. It wasn't simplistic as that. They had middlemen. They had people, Africans, that were working with them because Africa is an extremely large continent. It is the second largest continent in the world. You can sort of place every country in the world and put it inside of Africa with the exception of all of Russia, and you'll have room left over. Okay, the Portuguese at that time only had a population of about 1 million people. And so when they made negotiations with Africans from point A to point B, their population was only 1 million. Now, when the Portuguese supposedly came over here to what we know now as Brazil in South America, because that's the only colony they have is Brazil. You got to understand something. These people did not bring women. They didn't bring women to procreate with. They came as single men. And same initially for the Spaniards. They came as single men, no women. Okay, so you can't procreate if you don't have a woman. As a man, you can't produce children. So what they did was they had a relationship with the indigenous people and with the African when they imported them over. And the reason it was more simplistic for them to have a relationship with the African woman, because you have to understand Portugal and Spain was controlled by the Moors. The Moors were black people from North Africa. Their empire stretched all the way from Senegal to Egypt. Moors. They conquered Spain for 750 years. They also controlled what we know now as Portugal, which is one of the smallest countries in Europe. The Portuguese and the Spaniards came as single men, use an interrelationship with the Indian people in this country, creating what we call a mestizo population, Indian and white. Then they imported the African over from West Africa, and they had a relationship with the African woman, creating another group there. So you got the Indian and African woman all intermixed. They created racial standards based on blood lineage, which defined you in the society. Families came much later from Spain and Portugal into South America. But initially, that was not how it was done. So what they did was they created this hierarchy pertaining to blood lineage. If you are part black, you are part white, I'm what you call a mulatto. If you're part Indian and part white, I am a mestizo. If you're part African and you're part Indian, I am a zambo. These classifications defined you in their societies based on blood lineage. So, but the hierarchy in these countries is that of the white dominant society, even in their countries. Now, they don't have blatant racism the way we've had in the United States. They don't. But race or racism does exist in their culture. So the hierarchy you go, the higher you go, you want to be whiter, whether it's Brazil or Puerto Rico, whether it's Cuba or Nicaragua, whether it's Guatemala or Panama. You want to be whiter going up because that is your better chances in the survival in the society. Now, if you're black in those countries, you're sort of looked down upon, the lowest echelon. And they do have racial codes for people who are darker or blacker. So you want to be whiter. You want to be whiter because this is what's embedded into you. Because what your Spaniards and your Portuguese did, you want to marry an African, you can marry an African. You want to marry an African woman, you can marry her. But you want to marry the African, you can marry him. This is what was done in Puerto Rico. But what you don't do, you don't allow them to reach a certain level of power in those countries. That's why they're not there. It's not allowed. So what they learn to do is to indoctrinate the people in terms of lighter, closer to whiter. That's how you're perceived in those societies. Racism, yes, is there. Colorism is, yes, it's there. But you want to be lighter, closer to whiter. In Spanish, we have an old saying, la risa de razas, means the purity of Spanish blood. Okay, you want to be whiter pertaining to Spanish blood. You don't want to be darker. You don't want that. And it's the same in Brazil. In Brazil, you have over 30 different classifications of people. 30 different classifications. Lighter, closer to whiter. They have race problems in Brazil. Oh, yes, they do. They just don't talk about it. Because the black Brazilian or Afro-Brazilian, and we say in Portugal, negal, which means negro, they're at the bottom of the totem pole. So what they did, they begin to look at what black Americans were doing and say, well, why can't we be what the black Americans are? Look how they fought for their rights. We are at the bottom. And now look at the black American. He's fought for his rights and he's going to the top. They finally begin to look at that because they believed and they honestly believe they lived in this racial hypocrisy in terms of race doesn't matter. That's the way it's done in Latin America. Because if you go to many of those countries, and I've been to Brazil and many South American countries, you will see people that will intermingle with one another like color does not exist. Socially, it may not exist. But the hierarchy, the higher you go in terms of opportunities, in terms of jobs, politically, you don't have a say. You have no say in those countries because they know to keep you back. We're not going to let you get here. Socially, we can intermingle. I do it all the time when I go into Spanish, what we call bodegas. I speak only in Spanish. I speak in Spanish. I don't speak in English. I speak in Spanish for whatever reason. I'll speak in Spanish. Okay, there's a certain acceptability of me because I speak Spanish. I'm not Hispanic. But because I speak their language, there's a certain acceptance of me in their community, in their group, because I can speak their language. So that's the way it is in many of those Latin American countries. The higher you go, is the acceptance of white. It's embedded into the culture. Because all of their heroes, everyone they look upon in their countries, is of white status. It's not one that looks like them, it's of white status. See, with black Americans, it's just the reverse. We know our history because it's very well that we have heroes and sheroes in our culture that we can look up to and say, well, I think I want to be like Muhammad Ali, or I think I want to be like a Stevie Wonder, or maybe I want to be like whoever. I want to be a LeBron James. I want to be a those. We don't do that, but we have hundreds of people in our culture that we can look up to and idolize. And many of their countries, even...
What can you say about Asian Americans being the buffer group in America?
Many groups of people have come to America and have been put into this category of being what you call, unquote, the buffer group. But Asians know, they know that they are not Caucasian and they know that they're not white. But any group can come to America. And because of the way the black American has been depicted in America, and they can put themselves in a position to feel, well, at least I know I'm not treated like you. Oh, I'm better off than you are. Because the dominant society doesn't treat me the way they treat you. And many of them is not just Asians. Caribbeans have felt the same, and you have Africans that do the same today. Okay, I know the real deal because I live in the real world and I come in contact with real people.
Will there ever be time where we will see the black American community, Latinos, and the Asians coming together in solidarity?
Well, they can come together in solidarity. They can do that now. But you have to understand what makes a significant difference is the history and the culture. And let me tell you something about Latinos. Mm-hmm. I'm going to open up a can of worms about my Latino brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, when you see all of these, what we call the ICE agents, and they are arresting these Latinos.
Yeah.
And yeah, you see that.
I see that.
You know that those Latinos that are being arrested, if you see it, and being thrown in jail by the ICE agent, whatever, on their papers in terms of racial identity, you know what they're classified as? White.
Come on, white?
No, oh yeah. See, that's what I'm trying to tell you. The whiteness in the Latino culture is embedded into their DNA to be considered white. You see all of those Latinos that are being abused by the ICE agents, thrown on the ground, beaten up, thrown into these detention camps or whatever, on their racial classification. In terms of race identity, it's white. Because in the Latino culture, see, in America, if you have one drop of black blood in America, historically, you would be considered black no matter how light you are. And we have some in our community is as white as snow. We've always had them. In the Latino community, you can have one drop of black blood and you can be considered white, no matter what your complexion is.